Okay, Tony, that's you ready to go.
Fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Fiona. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me on to speak with you this afternoon. What I really want to give you all before the session is over is a real understanding of just how much the hiring market has changed over the course of the last few years. And we were discussing just before the session started that so many of the changes are not at all visible to people who are on the candidate side of the fence. And so if you're not actually well connected with in-house recruiters and recruitment agents yourself, you're probably very unlikely to be aware of a lot of the changes that have happened. So that's going to be the main focus of today's session, and I hope you're going to go away from today feeling a lot more confident about what you need to do to secure your next career move. In terms of the breakdown of the session, it's going to run for about an hour's time. I'm going to spend the first 15 minutes or so giving you a really thorough understanding of how the companies are actually going about hiring staff today and how that's evolved over the last years, because there's a massive transformation that's taken place there. One key part of tapping into this is to make sure that you have done the necessary things on your social profiles to actually be noticed by employers and recruiters. So we're going to spend some time having a quick look at some of the things you should be addressing there. And then very important and also hidden from view for a lot of candidates is the increasing role of employee referral schemes, which today operate leveraging social networking sites. And so there are things you need to be doing and that you need to understand to actually not be missing out on many of the opportunities that companies are looking to fill. So that's how we're going to fill the 45 or 50 minutes of presenting time. And then, as Fiona mentioned, we'll open things up to a Q&A session towards the end of the hour, and very happy to field any questions that have gone unanswered during the course of the session. In terms of a very brief background about myself and why I've been invited on today, I'm a graduate of Judge Business School myself from Cambridge University. I spent the early years of my career in strategy consulting with the German equivalent of McKinsey called Roland Berger Strategy Consultants. And then I left that business in 2000 to set up a niche job board for the management consultancy sector called topconsultant.com. So clients there would be the likes of IBM, McKinsey, Deloitte, Accenture, and so on. That was bought by JobSite and the Daily Mail, so I went and became an executive there for a while. And then actually bought the business back in the last couple of years. And that coincided with me launching Social Hire in 2012. And this was really on the back of me seeing just how much recruiters were moving a lot of their talent attraction and sourcing processes into social media and social recruiting techniques. So as a business, we help recruiters figure out how to use social media as a key part of their hiring strategy, and that's obviously part of the reason I've been invited onto the call today. I very much practice what I preach with this, so I'm very active on social media myself in a business capacity. I have well over 23,000 followers on Twitter, 12,000 on LinkedIn, and getting on for a similar number on Google Plus as well. So any questions you've got about using any of those platforms, very happy to answer those as well. But let's start off, as I said, by spending some time understanding just how much the job market has changed. And two things I want to convey before I really look at the transformation, two factors that you need to be aware of. The first is just generally there is now a much greater focus on having an almost perfect candidate fit for an opening compared with what we saw before the Lehman's collapse came and changed the market. So in the sort of mid-2000s, 2005, 6, 7, early 2008, we would have companies would provide us with roles they were looking to fill and looking to advertise to fill those positions. And in practice, they would be happy and they would actively hire people who only had a 70-75% fit to what they were asking for. So if they had a bullet point list of these are the key things we want candidates to have to be considered for this role, actually they were prepared to compromise on quite a number of those in order to make the number of hires they needed to make. And I'd fast forward and compare that with the situation today, where that willingness to compromise really isn't there anymore. If you don't have a 95% fit to a role that's being advertised or a role that you've seen a spec for, it simply isn't worth your time applying to that. And I know it's an issue I discuss with candidates a lot. You know, a lot of people take the view that if they apply to enough roles that they look like a good candidate for, then, you know, sooner or later they're going to get some companies interested in them. Actually, that's now changed. I would say invest your time in tracking down the roles that you're really a perfect fit for, and then doing an absolutely stellar job of applying to a far smaller number of positions. That would be, you know, my overall recommendation to you in terms of applying for roles in today's economy versus the one of just a few years ago. And the second thing to really be aware of is just the massive change in the economics of hiring channels and barriers to entry for companies doing things themselves now that previously they had to engage external headhunters or recruitment firms to be able to do, has just completely changed the market. And that's what we're going to look at and try and understand over the course of the next few minutes. So let's go back in time to the 1990s, so the time when I was first going into the jobs market, and some of you on the call are probably of a similar age. Some of you will have been in employment more recently than that. But I'm going to take you through looking at this, how it was back then, how it was 10 years ago, and how it is now. And that's what's going to really allow you to see how much things have changed, and therefore how much you need to be changing your own job search strategy. Okay, so on the left axis here, we're just looking at how much does it cost to make each additional hire for a business. And on the horizontal axis, what candidate access do each of these channels give an employer? So is it only reaching a small portion of the market that they would be interested in, or is it comprehensively reaching all the candidates that they would want to reach? And what you can see from the position back in the 1990s, so before job boards came about, before the internet had fully taken a grip on things, is that recruitment agencies and newspaper advertising were all important. And the size of the bubbles here indicates what volume of the total recruiting was actually being undertaken by each of these channels. And actually the bubbles for careers fairs and referrals should be even smaller than they are. If only I could get the text to actually fit in those bubbles. So employee referrals, one employee recommending someone in their network to join the company, were a tiny source of hires back then. Careers fairs similarly had a modest cost per hire, but they simply weren't able to reach a large proportion of the market. To get significant volume, companies had to spend significant amounts of money on newspaper advertising. So those of you who are in work and in a professional capacity in this time, you'll remember the days of the Sunday Times and its huge appointment section, and the Thursday Times also having a quite considerable appointment section. This was one of the main ways of reaching a significant audience of potential candidates. And then recruitment agencies complemented that. And I just want to draw a distinction here between recruitment agencies and headhunters. Headhunters very explicitly are given a role to fill, and they will go out and research all the best individuals who could fulfill that particular position, irrespective of whether they're interested in changing jobs or not. They will map out all the top candidates for that particular role, and then they will then go and use their network or their cold calling acumen, and they will approach those candidates directly. That is as opposed to recruitment agencies, who are the sort of bigger recruitment names that you'll see in the marketplace, who have always filled their roles through a mixture of approaches. So they've advertised on newspapers, more recently they've advertised on job boards, they've networked on social media, they've used their own in-house databases, but they're predominantly using an approach of getting the role in front of lots of people and then sifting through the responses that come back. So that is how things looked in the 1990s, and I want to fast forward now 10 years so that you see the huge transformation that happened when job boards came along. So this was a situation in the early 2000s, so a couple of years after I'd set up Top Consultant, and when the likes of Monster and JobSite and Total Jobs and businesses like that were very well established. And what you can see had happened, and obviously that same time span had encompassed the internet becoming a really mainstream resource for everyone. What you can see had happened is that newspaper advertising had shrunk back massively as a source of generating candidates. Recruitment agencies, similarly, companies have been able to scale back their use of recruitment agencies because the job board channel had given companies such a low cost and significant means of reaching out to a large portion of the candidate pool that they would be interested in. The internet had a number of other effects, so you did start to see company websites appearing in the bottom left there. They're obviously very low cost. Once you set up the website, you're just taking in applications from any candidates that visit the site. But they weren't a significant source of candidates for companies, albeit they would have liked to have got more candidates through that route. Employee referral schemes, obviously once staff were able to start emailing job opportunities to people in their network, then the ability to get hires in through connections of your existing staff was taken up a notch, and so that's why that has moved across a little bit, but it still wasn't a major source of hires for companies. They simply couldn't get the volume of candidates that they needed through that channel. So the big losers here were the newspapers and, to a degree, recruitment agencies as well. The Sunday Times, their appointments section almost disappeared. The Thursday appointments section pretty much disappeared. And lots of niche publications that served different sectors that had previously been magazines that carried job adverts for that particular profession, they went out of business. So these are the major changes that happened. And you can understand from the direct employer point of view, if I'm going to pay a recruitment agency 25% of my candidate's starting salary as a fee for them to have found that candidate and got that hire, then if I can do that directly myself via job board advertising or by looking at the CV databases of job boards, then as a business, I'm obviously going to try and do that as much as I'm able to. And so that was the really big change that occurred 10 years ago compared with a couple of decades ago. But now let's fast forward again, because what you're going to see is that the change that's happened now with social media is just as big, but it's far, far more hidden. Okay? So what we see now is the newspaper industry has really shrunk back, and there's now a very small proportion of all roles that are being advertised on newspapers, and I certainly wouldn't talk about that as being a comprehensive means for anyone to go about looking for a job anymore. Recruitment agencies have been shrunk back further still, so companies in parallel to this, and that you don't see on this chart, all major corporates over the last few years have significantly increased the size of their in-house recruitment teams. So they have brought in-house the ability and the resource to be able to go out and find candidates and approach candidates and recruit candidates directly themselves. And so that's why recruitment agencies, you're continuing to see their suffering relative to the position that they enjoyed previously. Company websites have grown a little bit in their reach, just through more mass adoption and through companies being able to advertise them more effectively and drive traffic there. Employee referral schemes have actually taken off quite significantly, and the positioning of them on this chart is slightly doesn't do justice to that. We're going to talk about employee referrals specifically later on the call, so I won't dwell on them too much for the moment. But what you need to know here is that companies have either tried these social referral technologies and have really embraced them and are using them very extensively, or they've yet to try them at all. And that's why the referral bubble is only where it is there. Actually, over the course of the next year or two, I expect to see that bubble get a lot bigger and move over towards the right, and to increasingly be the size of the job board bubble there. The new entrant, of course, there is social media, and this comprises a number of different elements, but overall we're talking about the ability of companies now to research and find candidates that they want to hire for a position and to approach those candidates directly without ever having advertised the position openly at all. And there's been some fascinating data in the US over the course of the last year or so, which shows that for the last couple of decades, the number of new people getting into jobs and the number of advertised vacancies that there have been in the US economy have moved almost completely in parallel. So as more jobs were advertised, you see that a very short while afterwards, more people are in employment. What happened over the course of the last years is that that relationship completely broke down. And the reason for that is that companies have started to try and fill the positions that they have in their business without ever advertising them. And so, whereas up until a few years ago, the advertised roles that were out there would very much reflect all of the open positions that were available, nowadays a significant number are being filled by companies approaching candidates directly or by them going through their social referral programs, and those positions never actually appearing publicly anywhere for a candidate to be able to research and find them. And that has an absolutely massive implication on you in terms of your next career move and whether you are maximizing the number of opportunities that you're being considered for. The flip side of that, and this is very interesting in the job board space, is if you go back just a few years, the order in which companies would have tried to fill roles would have been they would put everything on job boards first, because job boards were one of their lowest cost sources of attracting and hiring candidates. If you fast forward to today's market, a lot of these companies have now bought licenses for LinkedIn, or they've bought licenses for people aggregators, which allow them to search for candidates on social networks and approach them directly. And so at the point at which they have a new role come into the business that needs to be filled, they can go and try and fill those roles at no extra incremental cost. So zero extra cost to the business to go and try and find candidates and approach them on LinkedIn, or to go and try and find candidates on other social sites and approach them directly. Whereas if they want to put those jobs onto a job board, there is, at a corporate level, quite a significant expense to doing that. And if you talk to people within the job board industry, what they will tell you off the record is that there are now far fewer jobs being advertised on job boards than there were just a few years ago. And whereas a job board would historically have carried most of the openings that a company was looking to fill, now it's only carrying some of the harder to fill roles that the company are struggling to fill by approaching candidates directly. Or they have a relationship that means that they can post jobs onto that job board at no extra cost. And so they do post everything, but it's really only a fallback position for them to ever look at the responses that come through that channel. So if I take LinkedIn as an example of this, when a recruiter gets their license on LinkedIn, they can approach candidates directly, and they can send bulk emails to all the candidates they want to invite for a particular role. And as part of that package, they will have included a whole load of job adverts. So because they're included in the package, the company will by and large choose to post the adverts onto LinkedIn. But when you talk to recruiters about where they're making their hires, they're getting most of the hires from the candidates they're approaching directly, and they're only turning to look at the responses they're getting from the job advertising side of things if their own direct approaches have failed. And I know one of the questions we had come in prior to today's session was all around, I've been applying to lots of roles that I've seen advertised out there, and I'm just not getting anywhere. What am I doing wrong? Well, I hope in describing the way that things have changed here, you now have a better understanding of what is happening. A lot of the openings that you're likely to have seen advertised, the company probably isn't relying on those job adverts to produce the hires for that position. They've probably already found and approached lots of candidates that they want to hire via social media. They may well also have a lot of suitable candidates have come through them through the employee referral scheme. And so the job advertisement that you've seen is more of a backup than it is a genuine attempt to fill that position. Now, there are exceptions where you find job boards that are expensively priced, niche sites that charge a premium for the audience that they reach. Obviously, the companies that are paying to advertise there, and my business, Top Consultant, would be an example of this, it's very much the case that they have open positions that they need to fill, and they've turned to the job board to help with that. But if you're going to sites that have a very low price point, or where the job adverts are bundled in as part of another service, as with LinkedIn, then you need to be very wary of that. Okay, so that's the changing role here, and recruitment agencies, I would recommend that it's worth you maintaining relationships with them. There are certainly positions that get filled through recruitment agencies, even with the rise of social media, for a variety of reasons that aren't about to go away. If I give you just a couple of those, you could have a situation where some key individuals have resigned from a company, and that company needs to find replacements for those positions, but they don't particularly want it known in the market that this has been happening. And so for them to actually advertise those positions or to directly approach candidates on social media isn't really discreet enough for them. And so they'll use recruitment agencies to generate interest in those positions much more anonymously. So that's one reason why you see recruitment firms continuing to get a lot of business. Another reason is just to provide scale in the recruitment function. The way recruitment agencies typically work is they don't charge any fees unless a candidate is hired. So as a company, if we find our recruitment team stretched and unable to work on all the open positions that we currently have as a business, getting a recruitment agency to work on some of those assignments for us is actually a risk-free way of us getting some extra resource onto those roles, and we only end up incurring a charge if we do actually make the hire through that recruitment agency. So there are some good reasons why companies are continuing to use recruitment agencies, and I don't want you to take from this presentation the message that you should be cutting all ties with them, because that's certainly not the case. But you shouldn't be relying on either recruitment agencies or job boards to find your next role to the degree that you would have done even 5 years ago. Okay? So the hiring market's been massively impacted by the various social platforms that have emerged over the last few years. There's a massive change in the availability and cost of finding out information about candidates. So through LinkedIn and through people aggregators, in-house recruiters now have as good a database as any recruitment business in the world ever had, and they have that available to their entire recruiting team at relatively modest costs. The speed and reach of employee referral schemes has been massively improved by social media, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. And you'll have seen also that companies are now able to become publishers in their own right by building a massive following of potential candidates and hires on the likes of Twitter or Google Plus or LinkedIn. Companies now have their own readership, where previously they would have had to have gone to a print publication or an e-newsletter or a job board to get their message out to candidates. Now they can actually build their own audience of candidates and market to that audience directly at no cost. So these are all major changes that have happened. And as I mentioned, in terms of that US data, the hidden jobs market, so that's the portion of all jobs that are filled without them ever actually being openly advertised anywhere, has grown significantly as a portion of all the hires that are made in the economy. So if you have a think about what's likely to happen within a business now, if a new requirement comes in a big company, they're likely to ask their internal recruiters first and foremost to try and find and approach suitable candidates directly. And that will be the first step that they take. Simultaneously, if they've got a social employee referral program up and running, then they will enter the role into that, and that program will then look for suitable candidates within all of the employees' networks, and again, potentially approach those candidates without the roles ever being openly advertised. Companies may very well also alert their own followers via their own social media recruiting profiles about the roles that they're looking to fill. Now, if you just think about it for a second, if as a candidate you are predominantly working with recruitment agencies, you're scouring the job boards, the job centres, whatever it may be to try and find openings, nothing that I've detailed here results in you being aware of the fact that that company is looking to fill a position. So that is why it's so fundamental that the way you go about your next career move has to change. So it's critical that you as a candidate adapt your strategy to reflect these different approaches that companies are now adopting. Firstly, it's key that you've got really good profiles on all the major social networks that are complete, that are professional, that are appealing, and that are keyword optimized, and we'll talk about that again in just a moment. Secondly, in order to be considered by as many employee referral programs as possible, it's important that you expand your social networks at every opportunity. And I have lots of conversations with people about, you know, I've only got 50 connections on LinkedIn, I'm really careful about who I connect with, you know, why should I have a bigger network than that? Well, the answer is that every person you've ever met at a business conference or a training event or when you've been out meeting clients, whatever it may be, they are now working in companies who are using social referral programs to try and find their next hires. And if you'd connected to all of those people, you would now be appearing as a potential match for all of those positions. The fact that you didn't connect to all of those people means that you aren't being considered. So we're going to look at that some more in just a little bit. And lastly, I would say you want to be proactively following the social profiles of any of the companies that you want to join, so that if their first public announcement of positions that they're looking to fill is made via social media, you're actually one of the people who's aware of that and able to act on it most swiftly. So let's talk about creating profiles on the major social networks that are both complete and keyword optimized. And if you think about how recruiters are going to go about doing their search for their ideal candidate, most corporates, they're going to have a LinkedIn license that allows them to search the entire LinkedIn membership, so not just the people they're connected to, but actually every single person who has a profile on LinkedIn. So getting it right on LinkedIn is absolutely key. Something you may or may not have heard about is a type of site called a people aggregator. If you want an example of this, you could look at a site called Connect6. That's Connect6, the number 6.com. But there's lots of these, and what they allow a recruiter to do is to do a search for candidates, as they might do on LinkedIn, but it'll actually pull in and it will show them all of the potential candidate matches from across the web. So it will show them results from Google+, it will show them results from Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and GitHub and all sorts of other niche sites. And so for a recruiter, that's very powerful. It allows them to search multiple sources at once rather than just being restricted to the LinkedIn membership. And what they're likely to do as a recruiter, if you think of a typical job advert in the past, and somewhere in that job advert you'll have the list of must-have candidate criteria. These are the things that people in the business absolutely insist the candidate must have to be considered for that role. And we talked earlier about how this had dropped to a 70% fit, you know, during the really boom years, but is now a 95% fit. Well, this is part of the reason why. Now that recruiters can go out there and search for exactly the people who match what the company's asked them to find and deliver, then, of course, that's who they go out and search for, and that's who they go out and approach. So if you think of that section on a job listing of the things that a candidate absolutely must have, that is what your recruiter is going to have through as a job spec from the business, and that is what they're going to go away and search for when they're looking for candidates on LinkedIn or when they're looking for candidates on people aggregators and other social sites. And I know the presentation here will be circulated, I'm sure, after the session, but there's a link here that I'll send you to have a look at after the call, which is the most important LinkedIn page you've never seen, and that's on wired.com. And that just gives you an insight into what the recruiter offering on LinkedIn is like and how recruiters can go about finding candidates, how candidates are automatically suggested to recruiters. So it's a bit like Amazon. You know, people who bought this product could well also be interested in this product. Well, the LinkedIn equivalent is people who are interested in this potential hire are also potentially going to be interested in this person as well. And so these are the types of things that are happening in the background that are not at all obvious to candidates. So what I would encourage you to do is put yourselves in the shoes of a recruiter or of an end company looking for talent in your field if you're a contractor, and search for job adverts, because you still find plenty of job adverts out there, and find job adverts that mirror what you're looking for in your next role. And then go down to that candidate requirements section and start making a note of all the key things that they're asking for. And if you get half a dozen different roles, all similar, and you go down to the candidate requirements section, you'll start to see that there's a lot of overlap in what the different companies are looking for. And what you want to do as a candidate is to make sure that your LinkedIn profile, as far as is truthful, covers off that you have all of those key skills and key requirements. Because then when the recruiter does a search on LinkedIn, instead of your profile not appearing as a potential candidate match, it will appear as a potential candidate match. And that is why putting the effort into making your LinkedIn profile as comprehensive and as appealing as possible is so key. So you want to make sure that those keywords and skills and so on are incorporated somewhere on your profile. That could be in the skills endorsed section. It could be in the additional project section. It could be within your summary or within each of the summaries of the roles that you've held. Add extra sections as needed. And there's a couple of extra links you can look at there. The first will help you track down job listings to do this exercise. And the second is a bit of a run-through of what you need to be doing with your LinkedIn profile to fully maximize that situation. But the key thing is to make sure that you have all of those key skills and keywords on your LinkedIn profile, and also that it reads as a very appealing document, and in particular that the summary of your profile makes a recruiter want to reach out to you and invite you in for interview. If you think of your CV or resume and you've got the opening paragraph there, which is usually some kind of candidate summary or candidate overview, and that's really the pitch to the recruiter of why should you bother reading the rest of my CV? Here's why. And you want your summary on your LinkedIn profile to do a similar job. If a recruiter is going to look through 50 search results of candidates that look like a good fit for a particular role, you want to make sure that right at the outset your profile makes them think, yes, this person looks a really great fit, this is someone I'm really interested in us speaking further with. And that's when you start then getting those approaches through on LinkedIn direct from recruiters. But I would say to you, don't limit yourself to LinkedIn. There are, for all the recruiters that do have the LinkedIn license, there are lots that don't have it. And you ought to have a Google Plus profile. For those of you who haven't used Google Plus, you can set up a profile that's pretty similar to your LinkedIn profile, so it covers all of your professional experience. But the difference is that recruiters can contact you on there for free. And by using a people aggregator, they will find results of candidates who are on LinkedIn, but they will also find results of candidates who are on Google Plus. And if you're a recruiter who doesn't have the ability to contact candidates on LinkedIn, but you do see some candidates on Google Plus, then again that's going to open you up to more approaches. So be sure to add as much detail as you can there to your Google Plus profile. I would also encourage you to add your work history, educational, professional skills, and location to your Facebook profile. And I get a lot of resistance to this from candidates. I use Facebook personally. I don't want employers and recruiters looking at my profile, and so I'm not going to do this. Well, that's absolutely fine, and I'm not saying that you should grant employers the ability to look at your Facebook profile. But as a recruiter, you can search Facebook for people, and you can also choose to run adverts on Facebook that are targeted at certain people. So to give you an example, you could have a company who wants to hire in graduating MBAs, and they could choose to run an advert on Facebook that is only shown to people who are currently studying at certain business schools or who are currently working at certain companies. And so if you've got that information listed on your Facebook profile, then that advert will be shown to you, and you will then be aware of that opportunity and you'll be able to follow up on it. If you never bother to add that information to your Facebook profile, you'll never be aware of that company trying to fill that position and having been interested in someone like you. And last but not least, Twitter. You can add professional keywords to your bio on Twitter, and again, that is being massively used by recruiters. So having a presence on Twitter, sharing some updates that are related to your sector so that you start appearing in relevant searches on Twitter is again something that doesn't take a lot of time, but that can get you onto the radars of recruiters. So we talked there about how much the market has changed and evolved, and the way that social media and direct approaches have now become so important. We've talked a little bit about what you can do to your LinkedIn profile and the rest of your social presence to maximize your chances of being noticed by recruiters. But let's also have a think about why expanding your network is so critical for being found and approached by employee referral schemes. And let me just start off by showing you this particular slide. And this was a survey that was done I think around 6 months ago now, with a lot of key players in the recruitment industry who surveyed employers and recruiters within employers specifically on which of their recruiting channels were delivering to them the highest quality of candidates, or put another way, which sources are they likely to pay the most attention to because they're consistently delivering candidates that they want to interview and they want to hire. And I'm sure you can see for yourselves, the employee referral channel is way, way out ahead in terms of being the source that produces the best quality of candidates for employers. And this has actually always been the case. But the difference today is that this channel can now deliver a significant volume of quality applicants, whereas before, when we think about what it was like in the 1990s and the 2000s, it just wasn't able to deliver the volume. So you are really harming your chances of, within your career and your next career move, if you aren't tapping into employee referrals as effectively as possible. Social media is obviously the second highest channel there. So again, this highlights the importance of you being searchable and able to be found on those social sites. And then traditional job boards, you can see, still well above most of the other sources. So this is why traditional job boards haven't gone out of business from the arrival of social media and the strengthening of employee referral programs, because they do still generate a very good quality of candidate for clients. It's just that if they can avoid that cost by only going through employee referrals or direct approaches on social media, then obviously they will try to do that. So that's the importance of employee referrals. But let's just have a very brief think about how these worked before social networks came about. So if you go back even just to the 2000s, you'd have new positions within a company that needed to be filled, and your HR or recruiting team would have those as Word documents, and they might circulate those manually to members of staff who are in the right departments, who would potentially know people who could be interesting. Your employees then, this is before the days of LinkedIn, had to actually think of who they know, who might be suitable or interested. Now, if you think of your own LinkedIn network today and all the people that you're connected with, there'll be lots of people in there where you couldn't name me where that person is working today. Through LinkedIn, you now have the ability to look that up, and you know that. But if I had to ask you, of all the people you went to university with, how many could you name where they currently work, the number for most people I talk with is pretty low. So in this old days where employees had to think about who did I go to university with, who have I done business with, who could be interesting, well, a significant portion of all the people you might be interested in are actually ruled out by the fact the employee didn't know where those people were or didn't have any contact details for them any longer to be able to reach out to them. And then each employee was left to craft a message to send off to those potential hires to get them to consider being invited in for interview. And you know, that's not a very English thing to do, is it? To be sort of forward and salesy like that. So historically, this produced a very high quality of hire, but in very small numbers, which is why in those early charts it was never really an important contributor to the total volume of hires. Let's think now about how employee referral schemes work now that we have them bolted onto social networks. And I'm going to take you through these so you have a better understanding, but they're super powerful now because they have had built into them more or less total automation. They've had built into them smart matching, so that you've actually got technology looking for the best potential hires amongst the employees' network. You've got gamification to keep employees incentivized and motivated. And there's also the possibility of extending referral rewards outside of the organization. Now, if you think of a company signing up to one of these tools, and there are very, very big corporates now and very large numbers of the top corporates who are signed up to these technologies, the first thing that happens is that they invite their existing staff to sign up to the program. And it's voluntary, but there are significant referral rewards available for anyone whose contacts end up being a hire of the company. So actually, for most staff, there's not a lot of work involved here, but there's a potentially big upside for them. So you tend to get very high uptake of staff signing up to these schemes. And when they do that, they agree to connecting their social networks into the social referral tool. So then, as there is a new position within the business, that will automatically be scanned by the social referral platform. It will extract from that role all the key things that the company is looking for, and it will then go out and it will search the tens, hundreds, even millions of contacts that your existing staff have across all of their social networks to find the strongest possible matches for the key requirements that the recruiters looked for. And given that this is only going to approach people who have a strong match, this is why, again, that 70% to 95% candidate fit has gone up over the last few years, because the ability of companies to just go after the people they're most interested in has just mushroomed and ballooned so considerably. So what will happen then is each week the staff within that company will get through an email that advises them of all the open positions that the company has and the referral rewards that are available, and any people within their network that the program thinks are a really good fit for that particular opening. So the member of staff doesn't have to think about that anymore. They're automatically presented with the good fits. And all they have to do, if they want to forward these roles on, is just click a share button. And so this explains why the reach of these programs has become absolutely massive. And when I'm talking to the providers of this technology, they're reporting to me that companies that have really implemented this successfully are seeing between 20 and 35% of all the hires they make in their business are being made through these employee referral schemes. And these are roles that are not advertised. They're filled through direct approaches from the connections on social media. Gamification helps to keep employees motivated, so you will have situations where you have a leaderboard of staff and who's contributing the most to this initiative. You'll have departments competing against each other, so you have the finance department against the sales department, against the procurement department, etc., etc. Lots of fun games, lots of rewards that the company makes available for the best performing individuals, for the best performing teams. And all of these things have been made possible by technology and have really ramped up the degree to which these programs can deliver significant volumes of hires. And last but not least, it is also possible for companies to extend these rewards beyond their own company. So, for example, your existing staff could pass the alert on to alumni and other people in their network who can also share in these rewards if they're able to pass them on to other people in their network. And I'm sure you'll all have seen roles appearing on your LinkedIn homepage where someone has said, such and such a company is looking to fill this position, and there's a referral reward of X amount for any successful hires. Well, that would be an example of these systems reaching out to people beyond the company's existing staff base. But what I hope you're taking away from this, and what I said earlier, is that your chances as a candidate of appearing as a match for any of these openings is going to be directly related to the number of connections that you've made with people and the range of companies at which you have secured connections. So someone today who's been very diligently adding connections to LinkedIn for the last couple of years versus someone who hasn't been doing that and has stuck with their 50 connections, they're going to be in a far, far stronger position to make their next career move, and they're going to be being approached with roles month in, month out, with companies wanting to hire them, whereas the other person is going to wonder what on earth all the fuss is about and isn't going to be even aware that that kind of thing is happening. So I guess what I've taken you through today is hopefully a really good understanding of how much the job market has moved on and the ways that companies are filling roles has completely changed. I've given you an understanding of how companies are now trying to direct fill as many of their roles as they can, and that's primarily being done via social networking routes. You've seen from that the importance of making sure that your social profiles are complete, particularly on LinkedIn, but also on the other networks as well, and some ideas there in the presentation of resources you can look at to go away and make sure that's the case with your own profiles. And then last but not least, I've shown you the role that employee referral programs are having and how they're tapping into social networks. And as I said earlier in the presentation, as more and more companies start trying and experimenting with social referral programs and start seeing the types of success this delivers, I think you can expect this to become a far, far more important source of hires over the course of the next 12, 18 months, such that it really is something that you need to be tapped into the next time you're changing jobs. So having said that, just a couple of concluding remarks. Another piece of data here showing the source of hires that recruiters rate most highly. And again, you can see employee referrals is the top-ranked source of hires, along with internal moves of staff and direct sourcing of candidates, with job boards much lower down. So that, again, hopefully helps reinforce why you need to be changing your approach. And I'm conscious of time, so I won't spend really time on this, but again, just showing how much the costing of using different approaches to finding staff has really changed from 10 years ago to today. So I'd like to open things up at that point to any questions you may have that have gone unanswered. And I think Fiona's been monitoring those as the session's been underway, so I'll have a quick look through any that I can see that have come in.
I have. I've just gone back to Kelly, actually, because Kelly was asking about whether you could give some examples of gamification that you've seen that work well. So I'm not sure whether what you said actually answers her question.
I mean, I don't run those platforms directly myself, Kelly, so I don't have that interaction with companies. But certainly the platform providers I've spoken with and I've had demos from, have shared examples with me where, companies might be sharing, a holiday away for, a key department within the business, whichever department is generating the most hires for the business, gets to go away to Dubai for a short break or gets to go and do a ski break. That's a sort of, more costly example, but much less than that. You could just have, an expensive restaurant meal out, free each month for whoever are the top handful of referrers within the company that month. What you have to keep in mind is if the recruitment agency route costs a company 20-25% of your starting salary, then that's an absolutely massive budget that can be played with an employee referral program to incentivize your staff. Because a member of staff doesn't need to be incentivized tens of thousands of pounds to get involved in these kinds of schemes. Actually, relatively small rewards can produce a big influx of candidates.
We've got a question from Rachel. I don't know if you can see that. Rachel just said that she resigned from her previous position and took a gap year. How would you advise explain that on her profile?
I would say absolutely do explain it. One of the biggest turn-offs for recruiters is any unexplained time on either your CV or on your online profiles, because they assume the worst. It's a bit like, if you've got a 2-2 in your degree result and you don't put your degree result on your CV, well, recruiters then assume that, you got a third or you didn't even get a grade. And so what they assume is actually worse than the reality. And I would say the same is true if you've had a period of time off work for whatever reason that may be. Do explain that and present it in as positive a light as you can. But yeah, definitely include it rather than exclude it.
Okay, let's have a look through. Sarah's asked, let's have a look. So if you're trying to change careers, the candidate needs to concentrate on their transferable skills. Highlight these in your linked summary. Is that right?
That is right. And one of the questions that come up when I'm sort of going around business schools and the like is, I'm considering a couple of different careers as my next career move. How can I do that? Can I have 2 LinkedIn profiles? And I'm afraid the answer is you have to have one profile that represents you well for the type of role that you most want to go after. So you do have to commit to the type of career move you want to make, and then you have to word your LinkedIn profile accordingly. But yes, if you were changing roles or changing sectors, you'd want to do exactly what I described earlier and go through all of the candidate requirements that recruiters are asking for, and then you'd want, as far as possible, to weave those into your profile and to make sure in your opening summary that sells you as a candidate who is well positioned to make a move from sector A to sector B.
Okay. Sarah's also asked, a slightly difficult one, this one, I suppose. How important is age to recruiters? Should those in their 50s, for example, try to hide their age in their profile?
It is unfortunately still the case that there is ageism at play. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't deny that that's the case. as to whether it's feasible to hide it from your profile. I mean, a LinkedIn profile without a photo is very odd, for example. So I think it's quite hard to completely hide that. And I also think, even if you get through the CV screening phase, having been able to cover that up, if when you get to interview there is that ageism there, you could just be wasting your time interviewing with a load of companies who aren't prepared to take a chance on someone of that profile, and it would be better to focus your efforts on companies that would be prepared to take that chance or to give that profile of person an opportunity.
Okay, I hope that helps, Sue. Gillian did ask what about photos in LinkedIn, but I'm not sure whether you mean your profile photograph, Gillian, or whether you mean actually posting photographs. Obviously, a profile photograph is quite key. What do you look for in a profile photograph, Tony?
I mean, it just needs to represent you professionally, and I don't think you need to go into overkill. You don't need to have a sort of US, here's my college photo type pose. It doesn't need to be a professional photo shoot or anything like that, but it just needs to be you as you would feel comfortable being seen if you were going out to a sales meeting or going to interview. So you do see a lot of people who haven't put the effort into having a professional shot, so they've taken a selfie, or they've used a shot of them on graduation day at university or something like that, and that can set off real alarm bells, because if that's how little effort you'll go to present yourself, when you're trying to secure a new role, what kind of shortcuts are you going to take when you're actually, working in our business and representing our company? So, it's worth making the effort to get yourself a good business-looking shot, but it doesn't need to be more than that.
Okay, and finally we've got a question from Catherine. Catherine, she's asking, how does she encourage feedback from the application process? Because she finds the silence is dreadful.
Unfortunately, that's a big problem, and it's almost impossible to get feedback is the answer from anything other than small companies. It's a function of two things. Firstly, the volume of applicants that companies are getting. It wouldn't be unusual for a job that's been advertised where there's only one opening for that recruiter to have had several hundred CVs and applications through. So, just from a how many hours are there in the working day point of view, it isn't practical for them to provide feedback to all the candidates that they've chosen to reject. But also there's now the legal issue as well, that anything they say about why they have rejected you could potentially land them in legal hot water. If it can be viewed in any way as being discriminatory or of having fallen foul of any employment laws, then that's a risk to the company. And so you'll have lots of bigger companies who've been advised by their lawyers that they actually shouldn't be providing feedback to candidates they aren't progressing, because it's just an unnecessary risk to the business. So I think if you want to have feedback on your CV or your candidacy, the best way to do that is to actually reach out to contacts or loose contacts that you've got within businesses and send them through your application or your CV prior to actually applying and getting feedback that way. Or, as I say, if you're applying to small companies, you may well find that they have a smaller number of applicants, particularly if you're applying to roles on their website, and you may get a response from them. But having said that, it's fighting quite an uphill battle, to be honest. I think you would be better off reaching out to your own contacts in business and getting their feedback about what's good and bad about your CV and cover letter, rather than holding out for getting that information from the recruiters.
Okay, everybody, unfortunately we've run out of time, but we really do appreciate your questions, actually. It's such a big subject, but I hope you've all managed to get some really useful tips out of this. Tony's obviously very knowledgeable on the subject, so do obviously connect with him as well if you want to stay in touch with him. So I'd like to obviously thank Tony very much, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. And I'm just going to hand you over to Tony just to obviously say thank you as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fiona. And yes, if anyone would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I think you'll find I'm the only Tony Restell that's going to come up when you do a search there. Or on Twitter, I'm on @TonyRestell, all one word. So very happy to connect, and if I can help further, then please do reach out.
And that's what Tony looked like, just in case none of you remember. Well, you're looking for him on LinkedIn. Brilliant, that's great. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.